Okay, this is one of my favourite subjects, anchoring. Love it, and any opportunity I get to use that I do. And I've got lots and lots of friends who know this process, and even a couple that as soon as they phone me with a crisis, they say, okay, what we're going to do then? We need an anchor. And I love that. So yeah, so it's something that I use all the time. I really love it. All right, so today we're going to be learning about the anchoring process, which is really fundamental in NLP. And so it's a simple way to change an unwanted feeling into a resourceful feeling in a matter of moments. So when you create the anchor, you're setting up a stimulus response pattern so as you can feel the way you want to when you need to. So imagine what would be like in a moment to go from a feeling of anxious to feeling decisive and absolutely capable right in the middle of a stressful interview, or instantly being able to go from a fearful of the unknown to a curious and excited state. How amazing would that be? Looking at the natural anchors, I think the examples that I would use there, I was trying to think about this, the natural anchors that I have installed. And I notice as soon as I switch off the light or when I'm in bed, it triggers this relaxation state and I'm nice and sleepy. And then I thought about some sort of natural anchors that are not comfortable, but they're natural. So when my son is 19 now, so I'm starting to get used to things, but he's late coming home and he hasn't told me he's late and he's not answering his phone, then that can trigger a real anxious and fearful state for me. So they're the kind of descriptions I would give of a natural anchor. So accidental anchors, now they're usually installed unconsciously. So it goes through the process, as it's written there on this slide, that something happens and we react to that. And then that anchors a particular state according to the reaction we've just given it. So then a similar situation occurs, or we can experience this through an associated image or a sound or smell or a taste. Of course, we're always working with the five senses and we respond to whichever comes up for us at the time. So that triggers a memory. So then that triggers the state that was previously anchored. So thinking about a couple of examples I can share with you about accidental anchors. It was quite an interesting process. So one time I was at a friend's house. I used to stay over at my friend's house in my teens. I used to get a lovely sense of feeling free and safe when I was there. My mum and dad were absolutely lovely. So on this particular occasion, I was sleeping on the couch and my friend's mum, she came down, she popped on the radio. And I was asleep when she'd come in. She hadn't disturbed me or anything. But then I woke up really gently to the track of Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I just just remember the lovely feeling that gave me, just rousing to that the melody of it and the words to it. And then when the drumming came, that really sent this rush of like energy through my body. And oh, it was a lovely feeling. I've never forgotten that. And any time that I hear Phil Collins, I get the same reaction. So that's not an anchor that would change one little bit. And if I do want to have that sometimes, all I do is So that's kind of like my anchor that I accidentally acquired and didn't realise that it was an anchor until, of course, I've understood the anchoring process. Oh yes, I was going to then talk about a negative anchor. And this one goes back to when I was a little girl. And my mum used to work in it was a cafe downstairs, and upstairs it was a nightclub. And so on a Saturday morning when she took me there to prepare everything for, the evening, clean table, she was cleaning and things like that. And so, of course, being a little curious being, I went off to explore up and down the stairs, each room, and opening cupboards and anything that was closed, I'd open it, of course. And so I remember going into the kitchen And that was really fascinating because everything was so huge. So I remember seeing the you know, opening the food cupboard, as you do, and remembering how everything was massive, all these packets and tins. I'd never seen them that big, of course, you don't at home, do you? And then my attention was drawn to these huge ovens. And I remember thinking, God, you could hide in there. So off I goes over, sort of great big handle as it felt at the time, sort of opened that, just peered through, sort of opened a little bit and peered through. Next thing I seen this huge rat come running towards me. Wow, I wet myself. I just, you know, slammed it shut again, run like hell just in case it was going to follow me, you know, open the door itself, follow me. And so, you know, sort of hiding in ovens was no longer appealing to me, and sort of cleaning tables with my mum was a lot more appealing at that time. So anyway, I reflected on that and realised, well, what I realised is when I went into, any time I've gone into, or I did go into a, like a catering kitchen with those big ovens, I'd get this, something would be triggered within me, a feeling. And so I started to reflect on that. What is that? So I realised then it was like a really fearful, anxious state that was being triggered there for me. So it got me thinking, reflecting about that time, because the memory came flooding back then of, you know, this little girl. So I'm dissociated, seeing this little girl sort of slamming the, you know, oven door and running like hell. And then I started thinking, hang on a minute, how did a great big rat that to me at the time was as big as a cat get in an oven? And it started making me think about that. It was, how did that happen? So was that a real memory, or was this a distorted memory? So I realised that the theme sort of going through that was everything was huge. So did I then sort of exaggerate the size of this thing just to you know, because it's that within that sort of perspective of everything being so big? Or was it little tiny weeny mouse, you know? So anyway, the thing is, by being able to reflect on what actually happened there, where that memory was first installed, and of course, sort of reflecting on it and dissociated as an adult and things like that, it kind of just came to me that it just, when I see the little girl of me sort of running away, sort of imagine this great big rat when it was tiny little mouse, then that changed the state immediately anyway now, because now that just gives me a little bit of a giggle. So, so would anybody else like to give me an example of, before we move forward, of any sort of anchors that might come to you at the moment, whether it's a natural one or whether it's a accidental one? Anybody got any examples?
Your example of the song, the Phil Collins song, made me remember a really negative anchor from my childhood that has been installed for me, and that was our family dog had been taken really ill, and I came to I was going to my grandmother's, and I remember walking up the street, and my dad was sitting in the car, and he had sunglasses on, and my dad wasn't a big sunglass wearer, and it wasn't a really sunny day, and I couldn't understand why he was in the car and why he had sunglasses on. We got in, and it turned out that the dog had a terrible fit, and they were keeping him sedated, but until we as a family made the decision, but really there was only one decision to be made at that point, because things were so bad. So I remember we drove to the vets, and my mum and I were sitting outside in the car when my dad went in, still with the sunglasses on, and we had the radio on, and Annie's song by John Denver came on, and I cannot hear that. Like I would actually, you know, if I was in a cafe now, I would leave if that song came on. If I cannot be anywhere near that, even if I see the lyrics written somewhere. It's like, not having it. It's just the most unbelievably powerful negative anchor, and I just want to cry. I want to get away, and it's just the most horrible thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good example, isn't it? On, you know, so how the the senses that whatever we were experiencing mostly, or something happens right at that trigger point of when you are experience that feeling, how quickly that can be anchored.
Yeah. And
So that's a
smells,
really good example.
smells. Sometimes I suddenly realised that someone that I used to date had always wore the same aftershave, and it was years later. I was walking through some department store, and I smelled it, and it was just in that moment. I was looking for him somewhere, and it was really weird. It just took me straight to him. You know, when I was in a completely different city, but it was that smell took me to a different place.
No, thank you for that, Fiona. A really good example of sort of the anchors that we install through each of the senses. When you talk about smells and perfumes, I remember, I know my nan used to wear tweed, and every time I smell that, I just want to go and give that person wearing it a big hug. So yeah, lovely example. Thanks, Fiona. Is anybody else got anything they'd like to share?
Yeah, I've got one. Mine smell as well, and it's the smell of suntan, whatever it is in suntan lotion from being a child. And you will walk that in the summer, you'll walk somewhere and someone's wearing the suntan lotion, or a shop, one of these lovely, all the different scents, potpourris and things. And you go in and that smells there, and you're straight away back. A little kid on the beach, ice cream, sand, the warmth, the sand getting everywhere, the people you're with, because it was always the same sort of family members, and it just is straight away. You've got a grin on your face, but you're there, and like you said, Fiona, you're there, and you're immersed in it, so very associated with it. So yeah, that's my example of an accidental one.
And that's lovely, Caroline. Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So accidental anchors, we've had some really good, lovely examples there from Caroline and Fiona. And you know, this certainly demonstrates how they can be negative or positive. So that's really important, isn't it? So the next thing that leads on to that is the deliberate anchors. Now, I do know that, you know, first thing when I first heard of anchors, I thought about a ship. That's the only time that I thought about, you know, sort of associated anchor. And that's where so if we look at that, the anchor is attached to a stable point in order to hold the ship in a certain area and keep it from floating away. So once the anchor is dropped at the chosen spot, it will stay exactly where it is. So if we look at that as like a metaphor in NLP, what we're aiming to do there is to stabilize a positive state by dropping the anchor as soon as it's the exact point that we want it to be. So as we've always said, the anchors can be created around positive or negative experiences, and they can trigger either an illicit or resourceful or unresourceful state. So this is where we're only going to be anchoring what we want to anchor. So it's all going to be really, really positive. So, the deliberate anchors is what we're learning about today, which provide you with a powerful resource to use with your coachees to bottle the state that's needed to achieve their goal. So we already looked at, for the process to prepare the anchoring, we looked at last week at submodalities. And this is where we choose the memory that best reflects the state that we're wanting to anchor. So at this point, we would have already established the goal with the coachee. And we may have established that there might be something, you know, a big part of that is going to depend on the state that they approach this goal with. This would be something like maybe the goal is to go confidently into a presentation. It might be something that they want to go into a situation where there's a issue with a relationship, with communication or something. They might want to be able to get into the best state they can be to resolve that effectively. So we looked at that kind of thing last week on the kind of things that we would use state changing for, and we explored this through each of the senses. We played around with the contrast, the colours, the sounds, the smells and the tastes, turning it up, turning it down, making it just right. And we also looked at how we got the ability, because this is our story, this is our image, that we can add anything, delete it, change it. We can do anything we want with this to make it as compelling as it can be. So that's going to be the first part of the process towards the anchoring. That's a preparation. We've got to get this state just right, and it needs to be really clear too, because if we don't choose the precise state that we need, then when we go to use it, it's not going to be the right one. So we can explore that and really listen through what the coach is saying and check out all of the time whether is that exactly the state that you're wanting to anchor. And you might find that while they're going through their memory, they start perhaps choosing different words. So we do really want to check that out as we go along, just to make sure that they've got the state exactly the way they want it. So there's a couple of more stages to the anchoring process that are equally very, very important. So one of them is breaking state. So I say this is a really important stage because we call it the palate cleanser. And the reason that's really important is because the anchor we're installing needs to be at the best that the emotion can be. It's right at that peak. And immediately that we reach that peak, at its heightened point, the emotion and state begins to reduce. Now, I remember sort of being, when there used to be the fair on, oh my God, as soon as I came into that, hear the music of the fair, I got this rush of excitement that almost blew my head off. But I didn't stay in that state, that heightened point until I got there. It did start to reduce where you'd start hearing lots more things, but I always remember that heightened state. So if I was going to act, that's a good one for me to bottle at some point. So when we want the anchor to be well timed and for the motion that fires it, which could be pressing your finger and thumb together, it could be touching your nose, your ear. The coach will choose whatever they're comfortable with for that. And we need to be it needs to be precisely at the moment where it hits that heightened, best it can be state. And as soon as they hit that, we really want to make it clear to them that they want to quickly fire that anchor and let go. So as we see that they've done that, as soon as we can see they've fired their anchor, if they're not actually talking this through, this is where we immediately respond to that. Because we want to break their state, clear their palate, so as we have just helped them to anchor, preserve that anchor at the heightened state. So breaking state is, we don't want to be engaging in any conversation because that's going to take the attention off the activity that we're doing. So just something like asking, what did they have for tea last night? I really love that jumper that you've got on. And even if you dropped a pen and picked it up, that still draws the attention away for the coachee and cleanses the palate. So the final stage of the anchoring process is the future pacing. So that's really important too, because we want to check out whether the work that we've been doing has been effective. So we can ask the coachee then to think of a time in the future when they'll need that state. And what I find really helpful to do is ask them to really get into a good sense of visualization on that. So if, for example, we used before about going for a presentation, it's not just walking straight into a presentation, but perhaps setting the scene, sort of getting ready, what they've got on, you know, sort of reflecting on what they're going to be wearing, getting into the car, arriving, and then and it's sort of already telling them that at some point, once they're going through that visualization, as soon as they think that they need to elicit that state that they've anchored, to actually press the fingers and thumb together precisely at that moment that they need it. Now, what we are actually hoping is going to happen there, that they really will experience that state. Something will change the way they feel. So hopefully they're going to say, yeah, I really felt like that. You know, it sort of made this look differently, or felt like this. You know, we want to talk about that. It might be that it didn't, if it didn't work, then it probably means that we need to go back to it. It might need a little bit more work just to strengthen that. You might also find that sometimes it might be that it's the example that they've chosen to future pace doesn't really closely connect with the actual state that they've anchored. So a discussion around that could be to either choose a different future pacing example, or do they need to change that state any? You know, could they define it more clearly or more specific to the goal that they're trying to achieve? Okay, so going back to where was I going? Sorry. Oh yes, accidental anchors, just to conclude with that as well, that the good news is that if we can accidentally, the word's gone, anchor a state, then we can clearly deliberately do this. So this is what we're doing here, is when a coachee has a goal, if there is a particular state that requires, it could be confidence, motivation, it could be anything that is really going to help them to achieve that goal, and this is where we can bring in the anchoring. So what I've done, because of the timing of things, because I do like to spend a lot of time on the submodalities part of this and getting the really compelling image to work with. And so what I thought about doing, and lovely Fiona agreed to help me out with this, is we met on Saturday to do the submodalities part of this. Because like I say, I could take, you know, I'd like to spend an hour on this. If the coachee's into it, of course. I'd love to see how excited they get. So what we did was, so we met on Saturday, and Fiona came up with an amazing state that she was wanting to anchor. And of course, we went through the process of choosing a desired that state that she's wanting to anchor. And of course, we've gone through the process, which just to remind us what we did with that, the submodalities that we explored through each of the senses, played around with it, changed the contrast, the colours, the sounds. We explored the tastes and the, sometimes people won't necessarily always have a taste or a smell or something that's associated, and we can try and encourage them to tap into that, because it might not be something they've thought about. So for example, if it did have a taste, what would that be? So the more that we can really engage them and accessing all of their senses, the more powerful this can be. So with it, Fiona, sorry. So we did this, and she added, deleted, changed anything that she wanted to make this an absolutely compelling image, compelling memory that she was going to anchor. And so she's kindly agreed to continue the process on this webinar, so as we can go through the actual anchoring stage. So just before we go over to lovely Fiona and she tells us her exciting image and what that looks like and what she's doing, has anybody got any questions? No? Super duper, okay. You can always ask any as they come up later on. So Fiona, over to you. Honey, would you please share with the lovely group here the state that you are going to be anchoring today, and perhaps it'll tell us a little bit about the submodalities activity that we went through on Saturday.
So the state that I'm going to be anchoring is a state of being slow and present. So when I say slow, it's because that's the word that resonates for me, and I mean more when my mind slows down, and I sometimes get that sense when I'm really, really present and really there, that everything seems to slow down around me. It's almost like the world goes into slow motion, or I guess more accurately, the world isn't going at the rapid pace that it usually is, and it feels like I've got time, you know, that I can take the space and the breath. So that was the state that I was wanting to anchor. On Saturday we worked around that state. So the example point that we worked on was, I will quite often be in that kind of state when I'm walking the dogs. There's a particular walk that we do most days that's just really near the house, where we're in a wooded part, and over the years I've tried to make the walk a really mindful thing, because it used to not be a mindful thing, and I try and be mindful on my walk. So it's a moment where I often feel that state. So the image, the rich thing that Kathy and I worked on was around being on the path, was around hearing the rustling of the breeze in the trees, hearing the leaves on the ground, seeing the dogs running past. You know, Kathy asked loads of amazing questions and got me to really drill into the smells and turn up that kind of peaty, earthy smell that's often there with the ground, and to look at that, and to turn up the sound of the river that's quite quiet in the background, that also is really, really peaceful. So we were turning those up, and turning up the colours of the leaves and all of that around me. And we also identified with the questions that she asked that there was a really amazing moment that happens now most of the times on the walks, because little Dexter is currently learning how to come back. So he's learning his recall. So walks tend to involve filling his belly with treats at the moment, because he comes back, and it's like anytime he comes back he gets a treat, and he's learned so well that this is what he does, that you walk along and he comes running, and he always sits like he's a real little sitter, and he just sits, and when he sits he's so excited that his wee bum shuffles in the leaves, and there's this amazing little sort of leaf shuffling noise, and the wee face is looking up at you and going, God, where's my treat? And that's kind of like a moment where it is like that, because there's nothing in my head then except the peace and the gratitude and the being present in that sort of moment. So that was the sense of that moment and that surrounding that Kathy and I worked on to create the state, and to bring the state back into my mind.
Oh, thank you, Fiona. That lovely recall there. And has everybody noticed as well on how, from the beginning to the end of that, on how Fiona's state changed so significantly? You know, the energy, the smiles, and, you know, I noticed, I don't know if you did, you know, how Fiona, your head sort of lifted up there, you know, sort of a little bit more taller, and yeah, absolutely lovely. That's brilliant. So would you be happy now to move forward with that really lovely memory, that compelling image that you have there? And can we just once just clarify the specific wording of that state now that you're going to be anchoring?
I think I would call it slow and present, I guess.
Slow and present. Lovely. And in terms of the action that you're going to actually use to trigger, to anchor this lovely state of slow and present, how are you going to anchor that? What movement can you make that's going to be comfortable for you?
I think I'll do it finger squeeze.
Oh, fabulous. Would you mind, Fiona,
Yep.
moving your camera a little bit, just so, because what I'd really like to do is be able to see you do that.
Yep.
because that's going to be really helpful then for me to know when it's a good timing to break state.
Yeah.
And just to remind you as well, sorry.
That's it. I'm just turning it round. Yes.
Okay. All right, lovely. So just to remind you then, the process that we're going to be doing now is you're going to be recalling this image and really get into it, you know, just as you did, you know, all of those lovely, you're bringing in all of those lovely senses, so you're really in that image. And when you are going to anchor, when you get to the absolute heightened point, that would be the best that it can possibly be. That's where I want you to really trigger your anchor there, to fire it. Yep. And as to when you do that, then I'm immediately going to use the break state, that you understand what that is. We've had a good chat about that. And so we're going to repeat that 5 times. And just to remind ourselves that the reason that we repeat that 5 times is because the mind really likes repetition. And it kind of really embeds that command. What we want the brain to do is, when we do this, this is what I want you to remember. And so giving it that repetitiveness is going to further embed it so as it can make the correlation between that anchor and the memory. So, okay, now how would you like to, I know that you've sort of captured that lovely image. Would you, it's up to you whether you'd like to talk that through with me until you get to that really heightened point and anchor it, or would you like to do that internally? What are you more comfortable with?
I think I'd probably like to do it internally, just because that enables me to really focus on actually what's happening inside my head and building that state.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Okay, then that's absolutely fabulous. So when you're ready, get into a nice, relaxed, calm state if you can, just to feel really comfortable where you're sitting so that you can get into that lovely image. And when you're ready, fire your anchor. When it's reached that heightened point, the best it could possibly be. Lovely. So Fiona, I can see our little Dexter there is helping.
Yeah.
I must admit, I've got this.
When he's not hindering.
Got this little image now. It makes me giggle when I think about him sitting down, little bum going, rustling the leaves. Really got me that. So okay. So can I ask you now to get back into that image and make sure that you're recalling, remember all of those lovely sounds, colours, using all of the senses to bring that image to life. When it gets the best it can possibly be, trigger your anchor. Super duper. It was also, Fiona, lovely to see the children, Emily, Gavin. Oh my God, they've grown.
I know they're massive.
It doesn't seem 5 minutes because I've only actually, I remember that you were doing something on video and you had them in the video and they were little kids. Now they're kind of all grown up.
I know.
Amazing. Yeah. Only 5 minutes ago. Okay, are you okay to go for our third anchoring there? So, yeah. And again, just making sure it's the heightened peak of that lovely state of slow and present that you're looking for, that you're anchoring. Lovely. So, what did you have for your tea last night? I'm trying to think of something different to do tonight.
Spanish chicken.
Ah.
That's what we had.
Thanks for that. I've forgotten about Spanish chicken. We all love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. I'll check in every now and again when I want something new for tea and see what you got. Yeah, pity you weren't round the corner. I could have joined you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going in for our fourth time on that. Are you happy to go back into that lovely image and that lovely state of slow and present that you're anchoring? Lovely. So which room are you in, Fiona?
I'm in our family room, which is, well, the bit behind the laptop's the extension. This bit was existing. So, yeah, down the back of the house with pouring rain.
Seems all nice and quiet.
It's quite quiet, mostly. It's because they're all asleep.
Oh, yeah, it's that sort of morning nap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Notice we haven't seen Frankie. Goodness, that's amazing, really. He's helping Fiona. He's normally yapping at this time of the morning.
I heard him in the background today.
He heard you. He was with you on Saturday, wasn't he? Sitting here, used to you.
He was joining in, and then he came and said hello, which was very sweet.
Yeah. And how he responded when you did your doggy voice.
Yes, he was walking away because I was talking to these two monsters.
Yeah. All right, Fiona. So one more time to really, really embed this association between that anchor and that lovely state of slow and present that you're going to be able to call upon anytime you want. So are you ready for that last final time to re-anchor it right at the heightened point of the best it can possibly be? Over to you. Brilliant. What was lovely there, Fiona, is to see the little smile that came with that. Love it. So how are you feeling at the moment?
Yeah, lovely, very relaxed and warm and just peaceful, and slow and present of all that repetition. That's lovely.
Yeah. So how do you feel now about testing this anchor out? Thinking about something, a time where you really would need this, you know, where it's going to be helpful for you in a particular situation, or as a response to something that could happen. Is there anything, you don't need to tell us what this is.
No, I'm happy to say that the situation that immediately came to mind is we're going into Gavin's school for a meeting. I think it's next week. And just, I think I'm going to have to be in quite a good state to go into the meeting, given some of the things that he's been up to. So I think this would be a really good thing to be bringing that state on before I go in, to get me to the most resourceful space that I can be before I go into the meeting.
Oh, wow. That sounds like brilliant, to be able to sort of prepare yourself before you go in and sort of get the best outcome that you're looking for. I know that it's really important to you with these meetings, and there's quite a few of them you've got to attend. So, okay, so can I ask you then to visualise then preparing for that, and whatever stage that you think it is, whether it's getting dressed in the morning, getting up in the morning, whichever you want to do, just to give it that little, to get it at the best in your mind's eye of it actually happening, going to take place. And when you get to where you need the anchor, if you can actually trigger that with your fingers, and immediately, as soon as you've done that, if you can come back to me and we can get a sense of how well that's worked. Okay, Fiona, you ready for that?
Yep.
Over to you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can release your fingers, thank you.
Yep.
I wasn't sure whether you actually touched them or getting ready to touch them. Okay, so how do you feel? What happened there as you, can you talk us through, sort of, not necessarily the content, but...
Sensation-wise, there was, as I was thinking myself into the situation, I could feel like my breathing shortening and becoming more shallow, and my chest tightening with that kind of tension. And then when I fired the anchor, I could feel my breathing just changed and slowed and deepened, and my shoulders came down, and there was you know, the state just washed right over me, and it changed fundamentally how my body was operating, which was fantastic.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So you described that state as being slow and present. So how accurate is that state in relation to what you're feeling now? Does that work for you?
Yeah, it does.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about moving forward, going to that meeting now? How is that? How are you feeling about it?
I feel like I've got another tool in my toolbox to just help me to manage myself, which will help me to get a better outcome.
Brilliant. I
Yeah,
look forward to hearing that. Oh, you're very welcome. I look forward to hearing how that goes.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. So, okay, Fiona, thank you so much for that. And it's such a pleasure to work with you, because I know how sort of how sensory aware you are. And when we were actually going through the submodality, it's so lovely to hear all of those lovely sounds and the colours, and I can really get in there and sort of visualise those woods and the buggy bums. So that was lovely. Thank you for that. So okay, so is there anything more that you would need, Fiona?
I don't think so, because I think that's a lovely way of just, I think it will work twofold, because it works in actually a physical sense of bringing that state onto me, but actually the process of doing it is also a way of becoming present and moving into the moment, which is also adds to that even more. So yeah, I think it all brings different benefits. So no, I think it'll be really helpful, and I think like that, you know, that'll be, and I can keep, when I'm on the walk as well, I can take a moment to reinforce the anchor as well, and just keep topping it up and reinforcing it when I'm in that space, which I think will be a really lovely thing to do. So thank you.
Oh no, that's brilliant, Freya. And what's that sort of reminded me of as well is that when we have installed an anchor, you know, if we're not using it all of the time, it actually might be a good idea to go through the process again, just to keep it strong and sort of really compelling. So that's something that we can do too. And it sounds like that's something you've already got in mind.
Yeah.
You could strengthen. So that's brilliant.